I'm here with Chris Rogers, who I have been a huge fan of Halt and Catch Fire. I've talked about it a little bit in different things when we talk about TV and when psychology is working on television and when psychology is not working on television, which is most of the time. I think Halt and Catch Fire is a great example of um, just somebody who really gets character, a group of people that really gets character. I know that you had another showrunner, and there's also a writer's room, and you all had some great actors. But I'm really excited to talk to you about the stuff that you've done. You also recently had Paper Girls on Amazon, and then are working on some other things. Anything that you want to, I don't know, say about your history or process?
Yeah, the history of my process.
Well, you just your history as a writer, future, past.
Yeah,
I don't want to commit you to say anything about something you don't want to
no,
talk
no,
about yet or something.
nothing is a secret. Right now, I'm on the second season of an Apple show called Sugar, starring Colin Farrell. That hopefully will film next year sometime. I'm doing a movie project for Apple that is an adaptation of a Ted Chiang short story I've always loved, and trying to get a adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle off the ground.
That'd be
as well.
great.
Yeah, so always a lot of irons in the fire, but it's a pleasure just to get to do one of them at a time.
Yeah, I know you had said you were just working on the second season, but I looked at Sugar when you had sent that, and that looks like a fun premise. I'm sure that's a neat thing to play around with if you've got a big enough stock footage or a film library of archival footage to.
Yeah, it's a wild one. I'm a little out of my usual comfort zone, but I think that's what was exciting about it, was to come into somebody else's kind of playground and get to use the pieces they had assembled. It's the first show I've ever been on that I was not the showrunner of. I'm just an executive producer, and so it's also a different experience to kind of be one of the cooks in the kitchen, and that's been rewarding and nice this year.
Is that freeing to not have sometimes when you are every part of conception of the character and all of it, it's almost like they're your kids. You really want to be careful about what somebody is allowed to do with them. Is it easier to kind of come in where it's more fun? There's less of, not an emotional connection, but it's more of a creative thing and less of a, I don't know. Could you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, it was new. It's been a learning process for me. And to be honest, it had a lot to do with my kids. These shows, which I'm so proud of and love to kind of give myself to fully, do often function to kind of take me away from home. And as I was saying before we started, I have younger kids. After I was back and forth to Atlanta for 6 years for Halt and Catch Fire, and then Chicago for the better part of 3 years for Paper Girls. The opportunity came up to do Sugar here in town, which would mean I'd get to drop my kids off at school and kind of be home at dinner every night. And so I said, well, for this year, I think that would be really nice, while also giving me, a creative outlet. So it's fun. It's fun to be kind of like on the team, but not have to stay after for, the notes calls,
Yeah.
which is a real, the privilege of being a showrunner, but also the burden of being a showrunner is that
is there more conflict as a showrunner than as an executive producer? Just different kind of conflict?
I think so. I mean, I think you just go to bed every night with the onus of making it work. You know what I mean? You dream about it. When you're on a run, you're thinking about, like, is it clicking? Am I getting the most out of my writers? Is it making sense when I watch it? It's a running theme. And while I'm very invested as an executive producer, I at least have kind of a showrunner to look to for this, which is different.
Well, and I thought the first season of Paper Girls was great too. I mean, I've always hoped, like, if they're going to adapt any more of his comics, I'd really like to see now I'm blanking on the name. What's
well, they did Why the Last Man. They've done Saga.
Yeah. I think, like, if you're gonna do something in the age of digital that really would be enhanced by that, not detracted, Saga's the one that I've always held out hope would be some sprawling, that or Southern Bastards, which is not the same writer, but it's same publisher, Alabama.
One can hope. Yeah, he's amazing. Brian K. Vaughan is a sweetheart, and Cliff Tang illustrated Paper Girls. They did that together. Yeah, I loved that. I loved those kids. I think it was a tough ship to sail during the pandemic. It shut down a lot. It was like kids couldn't get vaccinated.
Younger actors would be harder.
Yeah, I think it was a little doomed by its place and time, but there's a lot of stuff from that series I'm really proud of. So, thank you for watching it.
Well, I mean, really, one of the things that speaks to me more than any of, I mean, really, it is one of my favorite pieces of media. Like *Halt and Catch Fire*, I think I've seen because it became something where I was like picking it apart and seeing more every time I saw it, and then it just kind of became comfort TV. Like when we had a huge crisis with the business, the stuff nobody sees, like our whole website that books all of the appointments and everything went down. It had to be rewritten from scratch. We're switching companies, and it was just like, I'm going to be up for close to 72 hours. I'm going to be drinking a lot of coffee, and like I've got to I mean, and I think I went through the season like 4 times rewriting
Oh,
the website. It just on in the background keeping me sane. And I don't know. I mean, it really is one of my favorite things. Like you see people still find it. I mean, like Reddit and things will just blow up. But it was, I don't know. I'd like to hear the history of the pilot, but my guess was that it was coming out of, because I loved Mad Men, I loved The Sopranos, and it looked like studios at that point were like, okay, we need another period centric
mhm.
or very sense of place centric anti-hero group of ambitious egos in the post Mad Men world, and that was some attempt to do that. And it really easily could have just become very derivative of people trying to recreate that for the AMC trying to become HBO at that point.
Mhm.
And it didn't. It became this
Yeah.
thing that was like so disinterested in um, talking like anything else that was on TV, which I really respected because a lot of TV, was not great at that point. Like you just
Mm.
saw all of these easy decisions that could have been made, and then a refusal to do that.
Huh.
Even when critics largely weren't getting it. I mean, they came around by the end of it, but those
Yeah.
second and third seasons, I was like yelling at the paper sometimes. Like I was like,
Thank you.
when people were because they're like, well, everyone on the show invented every single thing in the history of Silicon Valley, and it was like, no, it's about how our wounds inform what make us creative. Like,
Yeah.
there
God,
was no
that's
way around that. That's not the point. Like,
no. Oh God, that's astute on so many levels. I mean, do I go outside in or inside out? I do think *Halt and Catch Fire* is a product of a time in television, right? I often think it's like a middle child of history.
mm-hmm,
The Sopranos and Mad Men and what were kind of thought of as the difficult men shows. You know, the great kind of shows that made the idea of show running and prestige TV were kind of like in their final seasons, and we had not yet
mm-hmm,
got to like a proliferation of a million shows. By the time *Halt and Catch Fire* ends, the only show people watch live anymore is Game of Thrones or Walking
mm-hmm,
Dead because they kill people off. But when it
mm-hmm,
starts, like it's still Sunday nights. Um, and so I think we're like definitely taking our moves and our cues from the shows that came before, and then somewhere in the middle, for incredibly personal reasons, kind of decide to start playing our own music.
mm-hmm.
So I do think it is that place and time. I do think the anti-hero is still alive and strong, and you can see that in Joe McMillan. And we were also incredibly lucky in that I think we had written that pilot, AMC had it, and then Steve Jobs passed away. And I
Mm.
think a lot of people were chasing the idea of like something Steve Jobs like, and they,
It amped up the nostalgia in
yeah,
retrospective.
and I think they said, "Oh, we've got something in house already that kind of has that feel." And so, it's so lucky on a million levels to have the thing even read.
Mm-hmm.
We would have been thrilled to be baby writers on Mad Men off writing that, but instead they kind of, read it, said, "Do you know where this would go?" And we lied through our teeth and said yes, and you know, got to take this great adventure. But I do think the great stunt of *Halt and Catch Fire* is it's just about people kind of trying to make it by like reinventing themselves and having their projects make them whole and creative partnerships and how fraught those are. And I wrote it with this other guy, Chris Cantwell. And it's it's the thing that took us from being kind of office drones at Disney to being professional writers. And so I think
Mm.
our insecurities and our fears and our kind of wide open, will this be it? Will people like it? Will it make it? Is really kind of the subtext of so much of those choices.
Well, and maybe that's what helps it work so much. I mean, do you feel like you don't see a ton of co-show writers? I mean, there's a couple people, but usually it's kind of one guy who's hard to deal with that has a fraught relationship with the network, but also a financial relationship, and you know what?
Sure.
You don't see like two guys getting along. I don't know why. Why do you think that worked for you guys, but isn't terribly common?
One of the great gifts of my life. I mean, basically, I come out of magazines. I started the Atlantic Monthly way back when. I moved to Los Angeles to work for Condé Nast. I think I wanted to be a New Yorker writer, would have been my dream. But the bottom kind of fell out of that. And I was hired by Disney to help move their brands online onto Facebook and stuff. I don't know why they thought I'd be good at that, but they hired me. And the guy who hired me was Chris Cantwell. We worked together for about a year. I think liked working with each other in a professional capacity. And then one night went out for drinks and kind of admitted we both dreamed of being screenwriters and kind of given up on that dream. And he was kind of writing some movies that, he wasn't sure anyone was ever going to see. And I was like, I think the best movies are TV shows right now. And so we started talking about pilots, and I read him, and he was really good. And I think he must have thought I was okay. But we just shared a sensibility, and I think that's incredibly rare. And so I don't know. It was also nice to have someone to turn to when it was like scary and uncertain, and go like, we're going the right way, right? Like we're doing this. We're not giving up. Like I don't know. It's a lonely thing trying to push a creative endeavor through. So I'm really grateful that for at least that time we were able to kind of.
Well, I think a lot of shows too that are trying to tell the story of like a decade or a period of history, they just sort of use it they use the sense of history just to get to the inevitabilities of their character arc anyway. But like your show does kind of, you watch people grow up and change and interact and then forget who they are and remember who they are in ways that are incredibly honest. And like the insecurities of the show change, almost like as the writing room grows up or something like that. Yeah. You and Harmony Korine are like the only people that have ever given me a panic attack through writing film. I mean, I had a like meltdown on the floor. My was like a new dad and do all this stuff with like the unlived life of the parent that you have to be, that Carl Jung said the unlived life of the parent's the biggest force in the child's life, and all that creative stuff that you haven't realized or acted on. Your kids feel your sort of anger at that, and they try and take that on as their project if you don't do your project. So one of the reasons to kind of get off your ass and do stuff is for that. Wow. And so like had all this insecurity about that. And then I think the episode is called Giant, but it's where Jordan is digging the hole and Donna's on the business trip and they're coming back. And there probably will be some spoilers in this. You should watch Halt and Catch Fire if you haven't seen it. I'll try and flag where those start if there's big ones, because I would like to talk about some of the more granular things. But like he's digging a hole to prove to them that something that he thinks he deserves or should create doesn't exist, and the hole's empty, and he's drank too much and the girls are trying to help him, and his wife's coming back to be like, oh, I made a mistake, and then seeing like all of that. I mean, I really I had 5 minutes on the carpet where I couldn't breathe. Like it was, I don't know, that's good writing. Good job.
Yeah, I guess I'm also going to say I'm sorry, but I know what you mean. I mean, it's interesting. I think the reason I'm doing this Cat's Cradle book is when I read it at 16 or 18 or whatever I was, it gave me like this existential, like I couldn't move for like 5 to 10 minutes after finishing this book. It just did something to me. I think that, we want, I don't know. I mean, preferably it'd be nice to have like an enlightening or an expanding experience of art, but hey, panic attack will take. But
I think it was definitely enlightening and expanding for me. A lot of it I just didn't know that was there. Like I wouldn't have known that was there.
Yeah.
But it was, and but the kids grow up. The family dynamics change over the course of your show. What the characters are running from changes almost every season in a way that's realistic. Like it doesn't just feel like, well, we got to get to the next thing because somehow we have to move from Texas to California because the 70s became the 80s, became the 90s. And all of that stuff was so, like you said, that it was almost like the stepchild or the in-between of the golden age, transitioning to streaming or something, which is kind of funny to me because it sort of is about Gen Xers, like when the kids are at the end, like Haley's telling everybody about this wonderful experience that they're having in the Buddhist temple, and it sounds like they're going through Angkor Wat or something. I don't know if it's
I think that's what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
But you can, you could fast forward like 6 years, and it was like, oh, here's the older brother of everybody who I went over to the house in elementary school, and I think that's right. I mean, that ended up being what was so delightful about it was getting to live with all those characters so long and kind of have their lives from the inside out.
I don't know how to stress this enough, but the thing that was so unique about Halt and Catch Fire, at least the experience of making it, was I just think there was this kind of wide openness that I can only equate to the first time you fall in love with somebody. And you're just like, oh, I can't get hurt. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you just go all in, like kind of blindly and very vulnerably. And we took that for such granted. I was 30 the week they picked that up, and just kind of like did it that way. And everything since, is trying to kind of get back to that sense of, I don't know, I guess it's rare. And so many people embrace that. And it was such a virtuous process that I think that kind of showed up in like the themes we were able to embrace. And then we were also allowed to do that, allowed to be like, this story is about, you know, Gordon confronting the edges of his own choices as a father, and what he feels constrained by. And we were kind of allowed to go to these very discursive personal places. And I don't know, I don't want it to make it about the industry and like the imperatives of making commercial things, but I just
Well, the show is about that, though, as much as the process of making it has to be.
I guess that's right. I guess that is right, because I think you can see, if you zoom not too far out, that it's a lot of creatives trying to say, am I happy now? Like, did this make me whole? Like, can I make this live alongside my personal life? And am I baking my own demons into the thing we're making here?
Well, and
all the time.
Yeah. There's different forces that make it the reality, but the reality for Hollywood and for tech is the same, and that the best thing does not always win. And something can almost be perfect, it can almost be beautiful, and it still doesn't happen. And I mean, if you just go back and be like, why do we use an x86 Intel processor versus a Motorola? I mean, it just a random, somebody made this decision, everyone jumped on board. It wasn't the best one. Betamax was probably better than VHS, but we had VHS. And a lot of making movies in Hollywood is the same thing. You can have this beautiful script, you can have 9 out of 10 people signed on, some executive says, no, this is the way it goes, and then history becomes something else. So I don't know if that was at all, if any of the frustrations or emotion you have as a Hollywood person, you see the metaphor with tech, because I definitely felt that when you look at the history of why those things are.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I do think that aspect of it is so present. But it's interesting, because I've got a little distance from it now. I think I was out at the Austin TV Festival recently, and they told us it was the 10-year anniversary of the pilot coming on. And the things I'm so grateful for are the experience of making it, and then conversations like this, right, where people are like, I found it and it meant something to me. That's like the meaningful stuff that kind of lasts. Like in the moment, are you like, I think we're at least as good as the Americans. How come we're not getting like nominated for anything? But that's ego, and that passes. And I don't know. I mean, in some ways, I'm grateful that it kind of flew under the radar, just because I think it didn't get clouded with a lot of other kind of, oh, people liked it when we did this, so maybe we should keep doing this. It was very true to itself internally. So, I don't know. I'm most fulfilled by just like the art that kind of matters to me, when people kind of just say, I had a personal experience with it. And that's, I don't know. That's why you do it, I think.
Well, and the, I think the marketing didn't quite get across to people what it was. I don't really know how much marketing and TV matters as much as Hollywood, so it may not. But one of the things, because I've been trying to get people to watch the show for 10 years, and I've gotten a lot of people to watch it, but one of the things that I would always hear is like, oh, I don't like computers, or I don't like 80s, whatever. Yeah. And I was always like, this is as much about computers as The Hustler is about pool. Like, you're looking at a pool table, but that's not. It's not.
It's a lift. It's a fucking weird title. It's, I get it. There's a barrier to entry kind of built in right at the top. And I do think the first season has a lot of that. We're trying to copy the shows we like. We're like, is this Mad Men? Is this, you know what I mean? I think you can feel us like kind of aping what we think TV shows are supposed to be. And it really isn't until the second season of the show that I feel like we're just like going for broke, playing our own music. So I think it also kind of can be a bumpy ride to get into the show sometimes. So if people,
I think the first season hangs together pretty solid, and the pacing of it ramps up to the end. Like, it's funny. The relationship of technology and like how many liberties do you take with it. I mean, some things are not as consistent as they get to be later, but I don't know that that's why anyone's watching it. I mean, the pilot does feel more like, trying to find a Mad Men, Sopranos, Breaking Bad type anti-hero. What is the, is the American Psycho really a sociopath, or, the Hollywood Wall Street, is there something there that's human or not, or you or me, or, all those big questions, but it doesn't really go there as much. I mean, Joe's so much more complicated than, how that character could have been written, and like has been written a lot of times. I mean, you had really, really good actors that kind of came together in a way that I guess everyone was affordable at that time. I mean, what was that? Did that change anything? Like, you're writing it long before they're doing it, but do you reflect on a performance or see things through there?
No, you beat me to it. That changes everything, and it was still a time where you would go film the pilot and then write the rest of it. And so we filmed that pilot, and just like certain things just jumped off the screen to us, where, like Mackenzie Davis, who was basically a newcomer at that time, I thought was so good as Cameron Howe. It was like, well, we got to write into this. And we cast Toby Huss as Bosworth, who was supposed to just be kind of this generic hard ass. But then he was kind of warm and funny, and it was like, oh, right into that. And then Joe and Gordon, I think there was a version of Joe where he was just Don Draper, and he was always right. And then I think when we kind of did the pilot, we're like, it feels like he's kind of faking it. It feels like he's kind of not sure. And it feels like it would be interesting if he was like kind of wrong-footed by these other people that kind of questioned that veneer of like kind of the Steve Jobs impression he's doing, or if he actually stole lines from Steve Jobs. And then likewise, Gordon was just so kind of brilliant, and we could give him stuff like digging that hole and he could pull it off, and you can't do that for everybody. And so in Success, a great show, I think, is a feedback loop, and you just see what's working and you kind of go more of that. As that season went on, we did a scene between Cameron and Donna, and we are like, oh, this is something, so I think that's what's really fun about it. There's a show you set out to write and a show you ultimately do write. And if you're not listening to the show, I just think you leave so much on the table. And so that, you hit the nail on the head. It was so much about who we cast, and that changed it completely.
The thing that I love about the way that Joe, so like if Joe came into Jungian analysis, what if he didn't go into psychoanalysis and it was taking a totally different Freudian direction? I mean, I think like the way that would be conceptualized is like, this person is incredibly intuitive, just deeply unconsciously intuitive, but it's not a choice. So he's always dreaming a dream and trying to reconnect to the dream that mom was having, at the end of her life. But also, that was the last time he was kind of contained and held by this thing, but he can't dream his own. So it becomes this parasitic thing where it's like, let me inspire you, but then slowly, because this isn't a choice, I'm going to take that over. And just visually, I mean, every time you see him being okay, then you realize he's not. He's reflecting a vision of what's coming in the next 5 years because he can't stop seeing the future. And I mean, just the first scene of him looking just like a happy guy from one angle, and then from the back angle, you see that he's looking at a Calvin Klein billboard, and then he unbuttons his button and takes off his tie because he's trying to be a little bit more of the next thing than the right now to challenge everybody all the time. And I mean, the wonderful dolly zoom of him looking at the Golden Gate Bridge. All of those things, like you see this guy until the very end not really ever be an individual. He's always so unconsciously seeking a family that there's no creativity outside of his own, like it's just his. It has to be connected to somebody else's dream, until the last shot where he kind of can see his life and is like a person for the first time, but probably also less important than he's ever been.
I love it all, and Lee Pace did so much brilliant stuff with it. But for me, that third season too is kind of such a, I don't know. He kind of hits a rock bottom. He kind of goes all the way down after kind of his San Francisco endeavor with Ryan, ends in tragedy, and then the kind of like version of him that comes back to Comdex and kind of comes back to life. I don't know. That's really kind of, I feel like, the spark of some new Joe in that, and that was very satisfying to me. That felt very real in terms of people that kind of fake it until big tragedies in their life kind of force them to kind of go, who am I faking it for? And I just thought he did that so beautifully, that actor.
The last season, there's a lot that's indoor. It's like more limited sets. Was that a thing where you're kind of writing to the constraint? Like, do they say you have less money, but we want to finish it because we think it's going to go be something that Netflix is going to stream? And were they seeing the show had longer legs at that point, and or was that, did you have access to the same kind of budgets, and that was just the way you chose to write it? Because it's a lot more intimate. That last
Yeah.
season is a lot more people talking around a table. That works well. I just was always
Oh, good.
curious.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say that's what I love to do the most as a writer. It's interesting, right? Because I'm on this show Sugar right now, which is a detective piece, and there's like big set pieces and stuff.
Hmm.
And I'm always kind of trying to drive it towards like, yeah, but what if he was in a restaurant emoting?
Hmm.
I just think that's what I love. And we knew them all so well by the fourth season that it was like, I want to like go to Gordon's birthday party. I want to like
Hmm.
be with Foz and his kid. I don't know. I think that's just what felt so attractive because we knew the characters so well. But
The
we also
camera's
knew,
closer to them.
yeah, yeah, we knew, but we also knew it was ending,
Mm.
which was a gift. That every season you kind of write to a cliffhanger, but try to tell yourself, okay, if they don't renew it, at least we've given enough closure that people aren't gonna be like, oh, but like, giving it a place to go. And so it was trying to say goodbye a lot of that last season. And so some of the stuff that just kind of still kills me about it is like that Phoenix scene in the last episode where
Mm.
Cameron and Donna talk about like the company they won't have, and obviously the episode, after we lose Gordon, and just because they were old friends to us by then. So I guess maybe
Mhm.
we were choosing it. We never had much money at all, so that you can probably feel that too. But you have even less by the fourth season just because everything costs a little more each year. So maybe we're doing that too.
Well, and maybe I'm not reading it right, but one of the things that seemed to be implied is, a lot of Cameron's arc is that, her dad is in the military and dies,
Mhm.
and she's a punk rocker, and she
Mhm.
maybe marries a version of her dad at some point, or there's something there. But it looks like, if Phoenix doesn't happen and she ends up going a different direction, it's likely that what she's working on is going to become military contractor technology.
Oh, I
So
never thought about
I
that.
don't know if
I
that was
never thought about
intentional,
that.
but that was definitely when I forget the name of the agent who's like courting her with the bangs, who's talking to
Yes.
her in the trailer. But
Yes.
when I was watching those, I was being like, I don't know. I didn't know how intentional that was, but that's what I was like. I know what she's talking to you about. I know what you're gonna be. I know what you're gonna be doing in 15 years if you make
Well,
a
I got to
different
tell
career
you,
move.
I mean, a thing I wanted to say at some point on this podcast is I am such a strong believer in that kind of death of the author thing of
Hmm.
like, sure, there's what I intended when it left my fingertips, but then a million people touched it between then and when it went on
Hmm.
screen, and what it means to you is just as valid as kind of like the top spin I tried to put on it by then,
Hmm.
So I don't know. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I had never thought about that. I think that's compelling, and I wish I had thought of that.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
overt, but the show's written in this open
Yeah.
way. I mean, the moments because I've had a couple patients that have watched it and talked about it if it was up their alley, and it was helpful for them. But I mean, the two things that, like, the moments that I see on the way that y'all wrote that you wouldn't see on anything else, they would have missed it, or it would have just been too like on the nose. It's like there's like a moment where Gordon and Donna are talking, and Donna says something that was very important to Gordon and was never really important to her. And you
Mm,
can tell at that moment that it's over. The marriage is over, but it doesn't really end for another year or two. But every moment that you see that after, it's her trying to ask him something on the phone.
yeah.
They solve a problem together as parents, and then she says something personal, and he just kind of hangs like he doesn't care. Like, or because like the way people change or fail to change is that we experience all this anxiety, and then maybe we put it towards a healthy behavior where we do something different, but probably we just put it towards something that takes the anxiety away, that is easy, and then we forget that there was ever anything there we needed to do. And when there's I think probably my favorite scene in it is Donna having this like wonderful reconnection with Cameron. She's smoked weed, she's laying on the
Yeah.
grass,
Yeah.
she's able to say all these powerful things that she needs to say, and then it's in her head. She never says that, but she feels better. And because that is that thing that is so human and so true and so sad, that
Yeah.
you just see all day, in therapy, that most people don't get about psychology enough to put it in their character.
Well, two things. One, I hadn't really I have not watched any episodes of the show since it was on, and I don't know if that was just like psychologically it was like too much to go back to or what, but they played that scene at this little reunion we had, and I didn't write that one. A woman named Angelina Burnett wrote that actual scene. You know, we break the story together, and then different writers go away to execute them. Oh my god! And it made me tear up. That's such a they're so good in that, both of them. But I also think it is what you're saying so psychologically true. You know, it's like in the world where we're brave and we say the things we really feel. But I also think back on that, and I think Chris Cantwell and I were unafraid to put a lot of our own very personal shit and like literal lines from our kind of marriage and our marriage to each other in the show. You know, so it's funny. Like I'll think of fights that characters have and say things like, you know, because you don't like it or because it didn't come from you. And it's like, I think that's us in some way trying to have these difficult conversations with each other on the page when it's hard to have them in person. And I don't know. I mean, that's why you do it, is to learn a little more about yourself. And this show did teach me a little about myself in terms of, I didn't really know kind of I believed in this cycle of all this until we got to the end of the show. And I was like, oh, I guess we wrote these people the way we believe people are. And, you know, you have to, that seems to be a motif.
Well, in technology being almost like a character on the show, how do you handle that? I mean, the line that people repeat over and over is, it's not the thing, meaning technology. It's the thing that gets you to the thing. And they're all people who don't have a community, don't have a family, have some sort of obsessive ambivalent relational style where they really like and also dislike people and really want to be alone and also really don't want to be alone. And that's kind of the driving engine under them, even though everything else is different. And so technology became this thing that they could work on together to connect people. And that's going into the 90s and the internet. But I mean, how do you handle technology as it changes being almost like the silent character?
Well, I mean, I think it becomes this excuse for them to have this family of choice, right? All these people that kind of feel unfulfilled in other ways, that they're able to kind of like agree and come together and appreciate the beauty and the project they're working on each year. And sometimes more overtly, you know, if it's a game like Cameron's designing, you know, put some charge of themselves out there, express themselves. But I also think that line thing that gets us to the thing, and I'm sure this was not said at the time, ends up being so much about that that thing of how we always kind of place our better life or our happiness in the future. You know what I mean? Like that this is always a bridge to that perfect time where we'll make it, or we'll be right, or we'll be first, or we'll have the idea, and then we'll be done.
And you're
and
never done.
And the show is that over and over again, you know. And I think that's the human condition, at least as I experience it. So I think the technology ends up being a little bit of a vessel to talk about that, but also we really wanted to do right by the people whose story we kind of were telling. So, which we felt had been kind of untold. So we really kind of interviewed a lot of people and tried to understand what the, I don't know, what love for those things was, like what the magic of kind of coding and taking things apart and knowing something before everyone else knew something felt like. And so, you know, it's some synthesis of our shit and their shit, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, and kind of like, I mean, in The Hustler, you see pool tables and there's people doing pool, but you don't have to know anything about the rules of pool. You just know it's a show about a character and like what makes a man brave and, you know, does, you know when he's doing good, you know when he's doing bad at pool based on context, but you don't have to know anything about it. There's no like wide shots explaining the game. I mean, there's no scene where they're like talking about configuring scuzzies for 30 minutes or, you know,
are you like, sure? There might be
what a bypass driver is. And I mean, maybe the engineers are doing that in the background, but because technology exists as a metaphor, you sort of always understand what they're doing, even if you don't have any context for the time. But
well, we did. I will say we tried to thread that needle, which is, I'm not going to claim to be an incredible engineer, but we lived in some ways in fear of the freeze frame, where it was like, if someone stops this and says, what are their hands on? What are they doing? Or like, what did she write on the board? Or what does it say on the screen? Like, it has to be real, right? Because the worst thing that could happen is someone whose story we're telling, and in some ways it's the story of like Compaq and all these other little companies we stole things from, for them to watch us and be like, this is bullshit. You know, like we can't do that because we're probably the one show that's going to try to tell these stories. So we really tried to have that be true, but at the same time, we had this this mantra about like, if it seems like they know what they're talking about, the audience will go with it. It should be true, but we don't need to stop and go. We don't need a scene where someone like takes a salt shaker and explains that it's the modem and I don't know. We don't need to like over explain it, but it also needs to not be complete nonsense. So
Yeah, for sure.
somewhere in the middle we lived.
Well, yeah, then the technology's right. Like, I'm not saying that there's any place where it's wrong. It's just that because they're talking about it contextually, it's accurate. It just that isn't the point. That accuracy,
I hope so.
Coming back in.
Yeah.
I mean, did you look really closely at where these people came in and out of history? I mean, there's a point where Joe McMillan looks a little bit like Joe McAfee for a second. I mean, do you read biographies of those guys, or do you just kind of know enough to do what you want to do with the character?
The former. That's astute. We definitely looked at McAfee for McMillan, especially going into that third season. Yeah, we read a ton, and I think that if there's any consistency to my through line, as a history major in college, I was a researcher in magazines. This show really kind of comes out of us wanting to do something like with a Glengarry, Glen Ross feel. Chris's dad having worked a little in computers, and so I went to the LA Public Library and got all these books, and we found one called Breaking Big Blue. It was kind of the story of reverse engineering the IBM PC, and just reading like these kind of like nobody read them library books, and going, there are stories in here, and the fact that they're not on the Wikipedia yet means, we can do something people don't necessarily know the punchline to. And so I always think that's what you got to do, is go way too deep and just see what stays with you. And so hopefully most of the characters feel like not one-to-one, but that they draw from a variety of real people.
And as far as doing a writer's room and two showrunners, I mean, y'all have a process. How do you like get everybody working at what they're best at, or was there figuring that out? I don't know.
Yeah, we were mentored in our first season by this guy John Lisco, who came out of NYPD Blue and Southland and some other things, and he was this incredibly benign kind of coach who kind of taught us his offense, and then he stepped away to create that show Animal Kingdom, and without him, I think we would probably have just like sped right into the wall. But by the time he left, we got the second season, we were ready to just kind of do our thing. And so I think you see a big change into that mutiny world. We also had not done so well in the ratings in the first season, where it was like, well, like the second season is probably the last season, so let's just do all we've ever wanted to do in TV this season, and just be happy with that. And then we got renewed, and that was a beautiful surprise. But I think the trick to the writer's room is, this will sound like lip service, but it is just to kind of create a safe space for people to feel like they can bomb and be incredibly personal, and kind of say anything, and to give people a lot of autonomy and investment in it too. So you're not like rewriting people. We had such like studs and killers in our room that we really tried to change as little as possible when a good draft would come in. And then just to have like a warm, fun time. And we really did. I look back on it very fondly. It's like a constellation of people, much like the actors. You could never kind of put all in the same show again, just because they've all gone on to kind of these wild successes. But yeah, I mean, that's half the fun of it for me, is sitting in those rooms and making those jokes and making those discoveries and having it go someplace you never dreamed it would go. That works is still like the magic of writing to me. You wouldn't think that there's like a right answer, but when you hear the thing, everybody just that, like it. There's an energy to it. So that's the woo-woo part of the process that I still
just
think
that kind of intuitive collaboration of like really listening to each other's energy almost.
Yeah, and there just turns out to be like a best version of it in some way, but you only get there if you're kind of open and safe and not, putting ideas down or saying it has to be this, or kind of trying to cook to a recipe. And so that this show is really allowed to kind of have that range.
So what's next? I mean, you said Halton, you wanted to do the Cat's Cradle script, but hopefully is that like written more for TV or like a movie?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a limited series, but it's interesting that it was Halt ended, and there was like kind of a million possibilities for what we might do next. But I guess you realize just like what choppy waters things face, and the Halt experience ended up being so charmed, and that we were kind of like, oh, this is how it works. Is they like your pilot, and then they let you film it, and they pair you with all these wonderful people, and everyone just kind of embraces it and develops it in a positive direction forever and ever. Amen. But yeah, I mean, I think both Chris and I, together and separately, have had a couple heartbreaks since then. You know, shows that never made it to air, shows that did, and kind of didn't quite get realized the way we wanted them to, like Paper Girls. You know, I say without any ill intention.
The industry has changed so fast over the past 10 years, especially the last 5. It almost feels like, I mean, by the time the ink is dry, you're presenting it to a different industry, you know.
I think so.
And the strike and AI debate too. I mean, I wonder what that changes, you know. And it's interesting coming off a show like Halt and Catch Fire, because like by the time you're finishing that series, you have to be aware in the writer's room that technology is like a little bit more of a villain than it was at the beginning, you know. That was big. By the end, there's you having some Facebook data leaks and political, you know, fallout from different things. And, you know, was that something that you were?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I guess, and I haven't really talked about it, but it is true. It's like, it was a more innocent time where we were kind of like these pioneers and these mavericks, and they're moving fast and breaking things. And that's, you know, there was the social network, but it hadn't yet kind of curdled into this kind of techno bro thing. And it's so, I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't presume to pass judgment on a whole industry, but they did seem more like heroes at the time we were kind of telling that story, and now it's certainly got a little more complex.
Well, and now, you know, it's like one of the, you know, a lot of the conditions that were just like, we want more money, the studios caved to pretty quickly during the writer and actor strike stuff. But especially with the writers, the huge holdout was they were like, we want to have the ability to use your style forever with AI. We want to be able to have this stuff. And I mean, the idea of AI writing television is terrifying to me. I mean, one, just because it would somehow be worse than most of a lot of what is out there. But like, two, you would have the ability to really, I don't know, like kind of control and curate something in a way that I don't think is good, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think I come to TV shows kind of hoping to see myself kind of reflected or surprised, or I don't know, you know, be able to kind of identify. And it seems to me very essential that be kind of another human being that kind of be at the wheel of that. But yeah, I mean, to me, the very obvious, terrifying possibility of AI has always been that sometimes you'll get notes that are well intentioned, like, do it this way, and you'll go, you know, and you reserve the right to say no, or, you know, you can't pick up my hand and make me do it that way. But AI will allow them to pick up your hand and make it, and to be like, but it would look like this. Ditto with actors, right? They can say, I'm not saying that line. But
yeah, the Star Wars movies, I mean, some of the people maybe signed contracts while they were alive, but a lot, you know, like Peter Cushing, I mean, was he aware that he was going to still be in movies? I mean, that's...
I mean, I don't want to digress too much, but like the digital extra thing terrifies me. Can you imagine like signing over your likeness in perpetuity to some studio that could put you in any movie forever, like after you're dead, so you could just be in the back? I don't know. That's
I mean,
wild. That's
well,
wild.
I mean, you could see like Cameron listening to a punk song where they're talking about a corporation owning your soul forever, or, you know, and then, you know, zoom out.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting. So I'm 40 now. The Halt and Catch Fire got picked up when I was 30. And I'm cognizant as I like go into my 40s of not wanting to be the like crusty, it's all going the wrong way kind of guy. That the older people I admire so much are just still so curious and interested in the world and kind of open to those things. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie, AI is an area where it's hard not to go like, ugh.
Well, I was just curious how that changes your process as a writer. I mean, the world you're writing for is kind of different, but then also just the way that industries pick things up and how they want them to. I mean, the incentive structure with something like streaming was already weirder and different than cable, but then now it's this thing where they're like, oh yeah, no, we have this $1 billion streaming service, but it's supposed to lose money and we don't care if anyone watches it. This is what we want written right now for the next 2 quarters or something. I mean, those are, I don't know. Has it been done that way before? Does that change the way that you conceive of projects, or you just kind of write what you write, throw it out there, and then see if it fits in the right hole?
I'm clinging to, maybe wrongheadedly, the idea that we still we still know good when we experience good. Like nobody was clamoring for give me a show about a restaurant in Chicago. You know what I mean? Like 2 years ago, and there was something about it that just kind of just like no one was clamoring for a show about engineers in Texas. You know, and I just think if you try to chase a thing or kind of move the variables to be successful or hit certain targets, then you're not. It loses that personal charge that kind of makes it vital to me. And so maybe there are better writers who can cook to order in that way. But for me, if I can't feel my way inside of it, then I just don't think I'll do a good job. So I can't work that way. And so
when you can feel your way inside of it, does it change just things like the aesthetics of it, the topics that come up, or is there, a certain tone to it, or just the pacing how it's going to be aired? Is all that stuff that you would even think about at all, or would that be in rewrites a lot later on?
Well, I mean, yeah, the great privilege of being a showrunner too is you get to assemble, your writer's room, and then you pick all the directors and you pick all the actors, and so there's so many chances to kind of not repeat yourself and to kind of make sure your influences are new and interesting. And I always try to read a bunch of weird stuff that I think kind of like lives in the world of the thing I'm about to take on next, and you know what I mean. So I feel like I have kind of new things, but at the end of the day, I'm still the filter I have to kind of pass all my work through. So there might be some similarities. And someone pointed out to me recently that like the character of Mac and Paper Girls maybe felt a little like Cameron and Halt and Catch Fire. And I was like, well, probably because I only listened to so many punk CDs when I was a certain age, and that's kind of what I can draw from at a certain point. So I don't know, but that I don't know. I think we come to our work to be surprised, and I still feel surprised by a lot of what I do. And yeah.
Is there any place where you went back and looked at it and said, "Oh, that's what I was chewing on when I did that 2 years ago. I'm out of that, cycle of development or onto a new arc. So I didn't know at the time, but that's why this worked, just because."
Well, I'll tell you, Chris Campbell and I wrote this project that I don't think is ever going to see the light of day called Rain Day People. That was going to be about a residential rehab facility, someplace beautiful, presided over by like an Alan Watts like sage and a family that kind of kind of dealt with the problems of modernity when it had to do with like your phone and just all the things we're struggling with. And I think we realized when it didn't go that it was like a place we kind of wanted to be patients, but maybe not a place that we kind of knew what we were talking about. So
yeah.
I think that was about being pretty exhausted and new parent. My first child was born the week Halt and Catch Fire wrapped filming. I got married in the middle of it. Chris had his first kid during it. It was your life transforms while you're making a piece of art, and hopefully they kind of can speak to each other. Yeah, and so the stuff I'm interested in now. I mean, I think we'll always be contending with those ideas of happiness being placed in the future and whatnot, but subconsciously, I think you probably do choose things because there's something you want to get at in yourself, and I'm only going to find out when I read it back. It's probably the way it'll go.
Well, this is a fascinating talk. Is there anything that we don't touch on you feel like is relevant, or that you want to say? I don't want to go over your time.
No, only that I think I said this before we began. I was so grateful to receive this really nice kind of email from you, and the thing that continues to endure about this show for me is just that people seem to find it many years later and have a personal experience with it. And that just is so gratifying, because I think everybody who makes something on some level wants to kind of be seen and understood. And so I think we add ourselves. I think the word appreciate means to add value to. We add ourselves to the things we appreciate. And I'm just so grateful you appreciated this and added yourself to it and gave me a chance to talk about it.
Well, thank you so much. That's really kind of you, and good luck with everything you got coming up. I'll look forward to it, and I'll
you too.
To season 2 of Sugar. Do you know if they use the same? I think there's a recent like Denzel Washington horror movie that was like, what was it called? The Little Things. I think the house is the same as like his handler in the first season of Sugar, but I wasn't sure. I
wouldn't be surprised. There's a ton of stuff. Because Halt and Catch Fire is from like the beginning of the boom in Atlanta filming. So, I mean, like the Nice Guys, there's a million
Yeah.
shows that I'm like, that's
There's a
Diane's
guy's set.
house, that's, that's Comdex, that's,
Yeah.
you see, you get certain eyes, you start to see this stuff everywhere. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, is it the hotel in Sugar is used in, is it that?
No, it's the house that his like handler or something lives at. It just
Okay.
has like the
The
numbers
Ruby
are on
is.
this curb, and there was almost the same kind of shot, and it looked exactly like the same.
I will check and get back to you, but yeah, I think once every car commercial is filmed on the same
Yeah.
street in downtown LA. So
Yeah.
there it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of places in LA that have been shot quite a
Yeah.
few times. Was it? I know. One thing I forgot to ask you, I've always wondered about that the brothers that sell the printer at the
Oh yeah.
Comdex thing. Were they based on Tim and Eric? Were they like Tim and Eric? Was that in any
They're,
way?
they're Tim and Eric-esque.
Yeah.
I don't know if overtly they were. I know one of the actors, Barack, a little bit personally. He was like a friend of a friend, and
Mm-hmm.
he definitely gives a little Wareheim vibe.
Yeah.
For sure. And the writer who wrote that, Mark Lafferty, has gone on to run stuff. I thought just leaned right into that. So yeah, that's a delightful and enduring.
Yeah, the first
part of it.
season it gets so funny at the end. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is just very clever.
I just think it has to be too, because like you said, it can be a little dry if you talk about computers. And I would probably write a show where people just emoted 99% of the time, but I'm really glad that's Halt and Catch Fire is a show where you laugh as much as you cry, because I think the one kind of softens you up for the other, and that's life.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much. And is there anywhere that I can point people to, other than linking to the places where Paper Girls is only available at Amazon? The other stuff, I believe, is available to stream a couple places. Is there anything else I can point people to? You got a website or an IMDb page? Anything you want in the show notes?
No, just see, watch the stuff. Love what you love.
Beware of each other, because everything's about to change. The world is going to crack wide open. There's something on the horizon. A massive connectivity. The barriers between us will disappear, and we're not ready. We'll hurt each other in new ways. We'll sell and be sold. We'll expose our most tender selves only to be mocked and destroyed. We'll be so vulnerable, and we'll pay the price. We won't be able to pretend that we can't protect ourselves anymore. It's a huge danger, a gigantic risk, but it's worth it. If only we can learn to take care of each other, then this awesome, destructive new connection won't isolate us. It won't leave us in the end so totally alone.